After months of deliberation, I finally asked the question that was on my mind. Can you tell me about the Masons? I know it sounds kind of funny, but to me it was kind of everything. It was everything I didn't understand about my grandfather. You see, he was a 33rd degree Mason, which is the highest you can get. And if you're not familiar, the Masons are a secret society. They've been known to tell all the secrets of the world. Most of the presidents have been Masons. And for me to know that he was the highest degree of it without really knowing who he was kind of burned inside of me a lot. As soon as I asked him that, I saw every wrinkle in his face light up, and he smiled like he'd been waiting for it. So we talked for hours, talked about every secret that he wasn't supposed to be telling me. At the end of that talk, I asked him the final question. That was, how do you become a Mason? Again, his face lit up even more than before, and he said, you just did. You see, when you ask that question to a Mason, you become a Mason. And I didn't realize the brevity of that situation until I was sitting in my first meeting of the Masons. I don't exactly fit in with the Masons, as you can see. A couple months go by after that initial meeting, and I wasn't studying. I wasn't memorizing any of the lines. I had forgotten about it, to tell you the truth. To me, it was a crazy idea that I had tried. It just wasn't for me. Until I get a call from my grandmother, who can be very nosy, as most grandmothers are. And I remember her asking me, is this something you're taking seriously? And I kind of paused for a second. I said, you know what? It's just not for me. And that silence, those few moments of silence, there was so much being told. The fact that her and my grandfather had a conversation, and he knew that it wasn't for me, but he knew that I wasn't going to do it. And I can tell that there was just so much disappointment because he wanted his legacy to live on. That was his entire life. He helped people through and through. But to me, I had a lifetime to do it. I was 25 years old. Why couldn't I do it in 4 years or 5 years or in 20 years when I was an older man? And then the truth of the situation came out when 3 months later, my grandfather died. You see, 2 months after I had that conversation with my grandmother, my grandpa was combing his hair and he hit a tumor in his brain and he collapsed. Nobody knew that he was even sick. We knew that he was smoking since he was 11, but he drank iced tea like that was supposed to save your life, right? All those antioxidants. So the day that he collapsed, everything stopped. The patriarch of our family had just fallen to his knees. The strongest man that I knew became human. And when your idols become human, that's a very, very hard thing to come to terms with. I stopped everything. I stopped going to work. I stopped talking to my friends. Every moment I had, I was with my grandpa. We had one last Christmas with him, and he was gone within 2 months. We didn't even get to say our final goodbyes. We didn't know it was going to be that quick. I stopped going to work. I stopped leaving my house. I stopped talking to anybody. And it got to the point where nobody knew I even existed anymore. I stopped getting calls. I stopped getting texts because I was the lonely guy. Nobody wants to be friends with the lonely guy. I had one last friend, and he came over to my house one day. And he looks around, and he notices that everything's looking a little awry. And he starts looking at the windows and the doors, and he realizes there's dryer sheets in every screen for the air to go through the windows and the doors. And that sounds kind of crazy because it's absolutely crazy. And so he asked me, he go, hey man, what's going on with the dryer sheets and the doors and the windows? And I started pacing back and forth, and I said, I don't know, I just need it to be clean in here. I just need it to smell clean. I need it to be clean. He ended up leaving. To me, that was kind of a purification of the house because I created this cocoon of loneliness and solitude that only made sense to me. And I can see why he left. It was absolutely crazy, and there's no right way to talk about this. So 2 weeks go by, and I don't leave my house. I don't do anything but lay on my couch in my bed. The only thing that I do is I draw one self-portrait a day. And these can vary from deranged monsters to happy monsters to furry monsters to humans to anything. Because to me, the only thing that helped me was drawing a monster and putting it on social media, because that was the only way that I was able to reach out into the real world. I found a lot of solace in that. And there was one day that I woke up and I had an urge to paint. And so I painted what I knew best. I painted a self-portrait. So I go out to my garage and I grab an antique frame. It was a beautiful, ornate frame. A piece of gold leaf paper, just sparkling, just beautiful, perfect. And I put it down on my drafting table and I started painting. And what came out was a purple monster. And that's the last thing I remember. Next thing I know, I'm back against the wall. My hands are bloody. There's blood all over my knuckles and there's glass completely covering the floor. I have no idea how I got there. I have no idea what happened. All I know is that my hands are completely covered in blood. I look down at the painting, and there's that purple monster. But instead of a self-portrait, I see a maniacal grin grinning back at me with words around him saying, "Loser, you're a failure. Nobody can love you." And I have no idea who wrote that, but I'm the only person in that house. So the next couple of weeks were a little bit hard, but I ended up getting out of the house. I ended up going to coffee shops. I ended up surrounding myself with people just to feel like I was acclimating a little bit better, because that painting signified a lot more than just a self-portrait. Every disappointment and grief and guilt that I had with not providing my grandpa with a legacy that he wanted so dearly that I never got to talk to him about was in that painting and the blood dripping from my hands. And that was the hardest thing that I ever had to deal with. So a couple months go by, I keep doing self-portraits, and one day, as the healing process goes, I look down and there's this guy on the paper. There's this guy smiling back at me. And this is the first time that I looked at a monster and I said, "No, that's me. That's how I feel on the inside." And I wish I could tell you guys that it's getting easier, that the anxiety has stopped, or that I'm not sad anymore. But the truth is, it doesn't get better. It just gets easier to deal with. But this little guy, Yerman, and I, we're going to survive together.